Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi, and this week in my Prince Eye on China column, I discussed former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's abrupt resignation and fleeing from the country after intense round of protests that led to the killing of over 300 people and mainly younger people and children. So this is one development that has got a lot of attention in international media and particularly in India. And this is natural because there are significant repercussions for India and the neighborhood. So naturally, there's a lot of buzz in Indian policy circle as well as the strategic community. But apart from India, there's another country that is paying substantial attention to the evolving dynamic situation in the region, and the situation in Bangladesh is China. And for now, at the official level, we haven't really heard much apart from a usual call for stability in the country. And most probably, Beijing will adopt a cautious approach and perhaps a wait, see, and act approach with respect to Dhaka. But there is no doubt that this crisis will significantly alter the geopolitical dynamics in the region and is causing problems for India as well. But I think, in my view, it might be a different case for China, and primarily because Hasina was seen as more favorable towards India and somewhat ambivalent, if not hostile, towards China. So, this political upheaval that is going on in Dhaka is absolutely being seen as an opportunity for China to expand its influence and integrate Bangladesh more closely into its strategic orbit. So, Beijing is keeping a close eye on the shifting geopolitical dynamics in South Asia, where countries' foreign policy are often viewed through their alignment with either India or China. China might see the political upheaval in Bangladesh as an opportunity to influence the incoming government towards a more favorable stance towards China. So, if we talk about the discourse, the ongoing discourse in China about the development in Bangladesh, it's a little different from what we are seeing in India. In China, on social media as well as on the state owned media platforms, there's a lot of criticism of Hasina's reign and preference for the military. So we're seeing that there is more empathy, there is more support for the Bangladeshi army rather than the former prime minister. And in fact, the portrayal of army as the true defender of the people and an entity that is supporting the people, it conveys a broader sense of disapproval towards the former Bangladeshi prime minister. And the military's intervention is also being perceived as a potentially positive development for the future of the country. So, this is something that's very different from what we are seeing and what we are discussing in India. And apart from that, there's also discussion about potential Western involvement in Hasina's ousting. There is a prominent South Asian scholar in China, Liu Zhongyi, and he is from the Shanghai Institute of International Studies. He actually speculated that the critical sentiment that we have been seeing from the United States and other Western countries towards Bangladesh, specifically towards Hasina, it might have influenced the narrative about Hasina's uh, reign. And he also highlighted that intensified scrutiny from international human rights organization perhaps further compounded the pressure on Bangladesh that might have added weight to the call for political change in the country. And he also hinted at the US instigated color revolution in Bangladesh. So, this is something that is perhaps similar to what we are also seeing in India, the discussion that we are also seeing in India. And then, like in India, Chinese social media is also abuzz with conspiracy theories suggesting Western involvement in the protests. Is just not the scholarly, strategic community that has come up with a speculation. But also, if you look at the media, if you look at the Chinese state-owned media, we would see there's a lot of discussion about how US might be behind the protest and behind the Hasina's fleeing resignation and fleeing the country. So some commentators also claim that the US and the UK, primarily because the opposition leader's son has been living there. So perhaps that was one of the reasons why there was this discussion about the involvement of the United Kingdom as well. And there is also discussion that there are a lot of NGOs in Bangladesh that have been getting funding from the US and other Western countries. So, according to these conspiracy theorists, Hasina's close ties with India and somewhat cordial ties with China, coupled with her distancing from the West, these are the main reasons that also angered the Western countries. And they also suggest that the current unrest might have presented a strategic opportunity for the US to perhaps incite dissent or destabilize the Hasina government. So, this is a very common perspective that we are seeing on the social media, and several Chinese commentators have been talking about the US involvement in whatever is happening in Bangladesh right now. Then additionally, there's a conversation about the situation's impact on regional dynamics. Of course, China is also not very far away from the region, and China-India relation and the importance of South Asia for China. This is something that's also kind of motivating the discussion on how it is going to impact the region, how it is going to impact India's policy towards the region. So one commentary observed that and in fact, India has been framed as in the discussion as Bangladesh's most important neighbor. So the commentary stated that India perhaps might try to potentially influence the policy direction of the new government. So there's a lot of discussion about what India is going to do as well. And in fact, the scholar from the Shanghai Institute of International Relations, Liu, also suggested that if the opposition gains power, India's influence on Dhaka's internal affair might diminish, but perhaps India would try to do something to influence the current government. But all in all, the new development, the development that is going on in Bangladesh, perhaps it might give an opportunity to the US to improve its relations with Bangladesh. Then another commentator, however, argued that Hasina's sudden resignation could present a new strategic challenge for the US and India, both of which are working to contain China's influence in the Indo-Pacific region. So the power vacuum that is left by Hasina could be filled by political factions that perhaps might be leaning more towards China. Then this discussion also tells us that there is not a lot of discussion about China-Bangladesh relation and how it is really going to impact China. So it tells us that China-South Asia policy can perhaps best be described as a subset, a component of its broader India policy. So China perceives the upheaval in Dhaka as a strategic opportunity to bolster its influence in the country. Of course, with Hasina being in power, India has enjoyed a lot of privilege in the country and close cordial ties with the government, and perhaps China was lacking somewhere. So this is something that China is seeing as a political opportunity to perhaps reach out to the new government. And looking forward, perhaps what we are going to see with respect to China's policy with Bangladesh, South Asia, is that it is going to stick to its long-standing policy, time-tested strategy to counterbalance India, and policy is to just align more with the government in the South Asian countries with Beijing, and this is something that China has been doing, and this perhaps in turn it harbors anti-India sentiment. We have seen something similar happening in Maldives, we have seen something similar happening in Nepal. So Bangladesh is one country that was friendly towards India. So this is something that perhaps China might take advantage of. Then a key objective of China's foreign policy has been to create divisions between India and its South Asian neighbors. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We have seen with respect to Pakistan and how India has been contained in the region primarily because of China's assistance to Pakistan, as well as other countries in the region as well. So by promoting instability within the Indian subcontinent and ensuring that India is surrounded by hostile neighbors, China aims to preoccupy India with regional issues and undermine its participation within the broader Indo-Pacific region, and particularly in initiatives such as the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. I think India really needs to be very cautious with respect to its policy, and it needs to keep an eye on what China is doing with Bangladesh. But I think for now, it's pretty clear that China is definitely going to take advantage of the situation in Bangladesh. And to conclude, I would say that there's no doubt that China's South Asia policy is just a prism of India's policy and its objective of containing India. And this is something that India has to be very, very vigilant of. Thank you. I stop here and I'll see you next time.